Blackstone Mortgage Trust. It's an mREIT, a mortgage trust REIT. BXMT is the ticker symbol. And Blackstone actually did fairly well, a lot better than most had expected going in through the Q4 for 2023. But what about the future? What's going to happen? My take is simple. I don't believe that interest rates are going to go lower very quickly. And because of that, because of the rolling aspects of a lot of the mortgages that are on the books for Blackstone and of course Starwood and some other Arbor, some other mREITs, that this could be problematic going forward. I do not believe that the Federal Reserve is going to be lowering interest rates at a rapid pace anytime this year. And I believe that there's going to be a shift and adjustment in Blackstone BXMT stock downward. But the eventuality is Blackstone itself will probably weather the storm overall, assuming that there aren't many defaults within their books. I know there's a lot of issues there, but Blackstone has been gathering reserves, if you will, getting ready for those losses, and they're still exceeding the market's expectations, which is good news for Blackstone BXMT stock. Let's jump in. I want to break down a few things and kind of show what I'm looking at. But really, for me, the big picture is interest rates don't move lower because of the rolling effect of interest rate volatility within what Blackstone is holding. That will affect BXMT stock. Let's jump in. For those of you who don't follow me regularly, my analysis starts with the economy. And I ask the question, what's going on with the economy? And the fact is, this economy is actually pretty strong. That's both good news and bad news. If you're a mortgage REIT, that might not necessarily be good news because the Federal Reserve is not looking to be lowering interest rates at a rapid pace like the market expects. So any moves we've seen in BXMT stock are maybe a bit artificial considering what's going on. The market is basically just glancing over some fairly robust economic data points, thinking that we're all systems go, keep pushing new highs, the Federal Reserve will be dropping interest rates. Well, why would they do that? I mean, we're looking at employment data points that are strong. Why would the Federal Reserve need to lower interest rates in that kind of environment? That could refuel inflation. And even though the Federal Reserve has reiterated we're in no hurry to lower interest rates, the market is sitting there saying they're going to lower interest rates. Let's keep pushing forward. And there's a famous saying by Warren Buffett, be greedy when others are fearful, be fearful when others are greedy. And I think people are getting real greedy right now, and they're glossing over some big issues. Now, there's been a lot of downgrades. I think it was B of A who just most recently, I think it was beginning of the week, they downgraded a lot of these mREITs. And it didn't really have too much of an effect because we just got earnings from these guys, BlackRock, BXMT stock, and they outperformed expectations. And as you can see, here down at the bottom, you can see the latest earnings release right there about mid-February. The Blackstone actually had a pretty solid number. Great for what's in the past. But what's going in the future is really what I'm focusing on, and it all boils down to interest rates and what the Federal Reserve will do. I do not believe the Federal Reserve will be lowering interest rates at a rapid pace, which will weigh heavily and could cause some inside damage to the reserves and the cash flow for Blackstone, which would affect BXMT stock. Now, I put together, this is an interesting chart. This is Blackstone BXMT stock versus TLT stock. Now, I follow TLT stock religiously. It is the bond treasury yield, 20 to 30 year, 20 plus for U.S. treasury yields. And as you can see, there's a pretty strong correlation between the price movement of TLT versus BXMT stock. My expectation is that TLT stock goes lower because yields will move higher. Because of that, as you can see with this correlation, when you overlay these two, you're probably looking at BXMT stock following suit. Now, it's not a one-for-one correlation, but boy, they sure do kind of move hand in hand. TLT stock is sort of the bellwether when it comes to, when you're looking at that ETF, the bellwether as to what's going to happen or what's going on with treasury yields. So a lot of people look towards TLT stock. Also, the U.S. 10-year treasury yield, that's the benchmark investment grade right there. Something I look at all the time, all day long. Given that, TLT stock, I've been saying this, sure, we keep popping a little bit higher, but the eventuality is TLT stock moves a bit lower. And that's because the economy is too strong. Inflation is really the big picture. We just saw a big jump in mortgage demand just last week, 11% jump in mortgage demand week over week, which shows that at the current 30-year mortgage rate levels, there's demand. The problem with the housing market is it's so skewed with everything going on with a lack of supply. People who have been sitting on 3%, 3.5% mortgages, they're not going to do anything with their homes. So you're seeing a big skew in what's going on with the housing market. So to see that despite the fact that mortgage rates have dipped a little bit from its highs in October, there's demand. So if the Federal Reserve lowers interest rates in that kind of environment, that would push price higher for housing because mortgages would drop, mortgage yields, which would spike inflation. 70% of the inflation we saw came from housing. I keep reiterating this, I do not see the Federal Reserve lowering interest rates anytime soon. They could have to be forced to raise interest rates, which would obliterate the market's perception. Eventually, yeah, they would have to lower interest rates, but we're not there yet. At the very least, the Fed stays pat for a long time. At most, I think they raise a quarter to a half a point, if not another 75 basis points. We'll see how that plays out. In the meantime, Blackstone Mortgage Trust, quarterly revenue, a little better than expected, but I wanted to take a look at 2024 projected revenues, 587. And then 2025, you're seeing a slowdown, and that's weighing overall on Blackstone BXMT stock. But moving beyond that, net margins taking a hit there. Even so, they still beat on reserves and being able to pay out on their REITs. Price to earnings ratio, 0.84 is considered a bargain, but I think we're probably going to see a dip even lower. Earlier, we saw almost sub 0.7. I bet we could see anywhere from 0.6 to 0.7 again on a price to earnings ratio. But we don't know how much damage any company, Blackstone, would see if interest rates popped a little bit higher. Eventually, that's going to wear on their reserve capitals. It's also going to wear on their flow in. Earnings per share for the quarter, but what I want to focus on is 2024 and 2025. $2.05 for 24, and then another, call it close to 15% increase for 2025. When you break this down, you see BXMT stock, it's a value. I just wouldn't buy it at this price considering what could happen with interest rates. That as a true value investor, you might be able to buy this stock even further lower with a higher yield if Blackstone can continue to retool their portfolio, build up their cash reserves as necessary in consideration with any kind of losses they're going to be taking because of what's going on in the REIT department there. 10.23%, that's a pretty solid yield. I took the future earnings, divided over top of course, the current price. This beats the U.S. 10-year Treasury at 4.25%. The S&P 500 is sub 5%. And my version of the S&P 500, for those of you who are just catching me on this, I take all 500 stocks and I ask the question, the next 4 quarters out, add each stock's future earnings, divide that over the current price. That gets yield for all 500 stocks. In the SPY stock, it's actually about 503 stocks. And you're left with 4.739 on an individual basis, not on the weight of the S&P 500. I don't weight the S&P 500. That's my own thing. Given that, BXMT stock, that's 7 solid or solid 6.5 basis points above what you can get out of the S&P 500. And that's a huge spread, but there's risk. There's lots of risk. But then again, if you look at the S&P 500 from that angle, if we get non-farm payrolls comes out tomorrow morning, and if we get a robust number, yields spike, the S&P 500 drops. Sure, BXMT stock would fall along with the S&P 500 as yields spike. But if Blackstone can weather going through, say, the next 9 months, the next 3 quarters, and not take massive losses and able to shift and dump some of their portfolio like they've been doing, then BXMT stock could be a solid buy down below. But I still think it's a little rich considering we're still getting more and more information on the economy and how that will affect bond yields, which would affect BXMT stock. I'm going to keep updating on this. I'm going to do a Starwood video, probably Arbor as well. And I'll get those out as quickly as I can, probably next week after we get information on non-farm payrolls tomorrow and what will happen with the stock market based on that. But if you want to follow along for BXMT stock, make sure to hit that like and follow button, and we will see you in the next video.